to start. I'm very honored to welcome you on stage because Henry actually traveled from the US to Switzerland. Well, he did some stops in between. Maybe you can tell us about it.
Yeah.
But I met him this spring, actually, for the first time in the tram depot in Bern, which is a really nice location. And there we actually had a very great conversation. He and his team, they actually are pioneers of open source and digital sovereignty since 20 plus years. You can actually get Henry Poole on Wikipedia. You see his profile, and he is one of the very famous persons who actually contributed very interestingly, not only code, but actually a license. Who of you knows what kind of open source license Henry Poole created? Anybody? Yeah, you are cheating. You're his colleague. Exactly. The AGPL. Have you heard of the AGPL? So Henry Poole, I'm very happy and very honored to welcome you on stage, and great applause.
Yeah. Hello, does this work? All right. Thank you, Doctor. Also wanted to thank the Border Patrol for letting me in. I've been saying I've been in Europe a number of times this year, and I've been introducing myself and saying I come in peace. Because, well, we all know why. I've got a talk. I just want to, I guess, share a couple things about myself before I get into the talk. I did release the first version of the Affero license, and it's pretty exciting to see a lot of folks are using it. It's the only open source license that's banned by Google, which is interesting. As Cory Doctorow says, it reduces enshittification. Does anybody know what that is? I figured I shouldn't use it here. I'm excited to be here. This is a particularly interesting place for me from the States because the sovereignty conversation has just erupted in Europe, and it opens up an opportunity, I think, here that we don't see in a lot of places. And I'm going to start out by the same story that I think we all have heard everywhere, which is in May of this year, the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court had his email system shut down. And it was done remotely, without any negotiation, without any warning, and just off. Microsoft is the vendor, and they said it was a technical issue. Right? What it demonstrated, though, and it echoed around the world, is that we are captured. There's 3.8 billion Android devices that can be updated and changed with one vendor. And that's 50% of the planet. And that's scary, right? There's probably not a ministry in the world that can't be remotely manipulated. Be a change in a configuration or just a bug we can't fix, but that's not sovereignty, right? And I'm curious how many people in this room are in the business of service to government. Can I see hands? We are, I think, the solution here. We're the ones that actually could make a difference. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what sovereignty is not. It's not a product that we buy. It's something that we practice. It's like exercise or democracy. And if we don't practice it, it atrophies. And you know, we've just I think, let it slip. In order to turn it around, I think it would be good to understand what it is. And I'm on the board of the Free Software Foundation, and the chart this morning talked about the whole movement starting around 2000, which is when kind of open source kind of came out. But before open source, there was Four Freedoms that was published by the Free Software Foundation, and those four freedoms are to use, study, modify, and share code. And they were in 1985, produced. It was kind of a digital Bill of Rights. And those freedoms are important. Sovereignty without freedom is oppression. Freedom without sovereignty is fragile. And they're important to have that pairing, because sovereignty could be a dictatorship, right? But freedom at the edge, freedom for a clinician to fix a bug, to improve healthcare, or freedom to tax officer to fix a form, or a local community to translate a tool. Those are where freedom really matter. And it's at those places where if we lose them, we've lost sovereignty. Since I started working in the free software movement and open source movement, we started to see these freedoms drift into permission. So they've been repackaged, rebranded, and I have a lot of friends in the open source movement, and I appreciate the adoption that's happened with free software. And I also recognize, and all of us do, that when we click I agree, we just get comfortable as citizens or government buyers. We see now what's happened, which is we no longer have control of our systems. And these vendors can now just change the terms, change the price, and it's gone. And that puts us in a really bad place. What I want to talk about here is the service firms that actually, and that's us in this room, we're actually the ones that work shoulder to shoulder with government agencies. We help to shape new procurement practices. We help to hopefully get them to build, open source program offices. We train them, teach them. We help them find other vendors. We help them, hopefully, to participate in governance roadmaps. And it's those of us that actually have to do it locally. Is like, I'm not sure who it was this morning, said that the laws were passed in Eastern Europe and people just didn't, you can't just pass a law and expect people to change. And there are a lot of us, a lot of people here in this room and our friends around the world, and we're the ones I think that can really make a difference. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how. But before that, the firm's stewardship, the services firms, I've been looking at capital for our company. I have a business in the US. We have 130 employees, and I have a friend who started Cygnus. Does anybody know who Cygnus was? Cygnus, does anybody know who GNU was? All right. GNU is not Unix, it's a play on words. Cygnus is Cygnus, your GNU support. It was the first free software services company. And they decided they were going to do something radical, kind of like Stallman did with free software. And they were going to create a services business where everything was upstreamed, where all the work was done in the open and all based on commons. And then they went to business, and it was radical, and people thought they were crazy. And then they built a business, and in, I think it was 4 years, they sold a Red Hat for $670 million with 120 employees. That 30 times their revenues. And later on, IBM bought them for 20 times their revenues. IBM's a sponsor here, right? And a lot of what they did was they developed these strong trusts with a community. And that's what a lot of us are doing. And may not be noticed on evaluations today, but it's coming. Evaluations for firms like ours that are actually doing this work is going up. And I'll get into that in a minute. I like this. Kittens. When I was in college, I took the psychology class, and I ran across this experiment, and they took these kittens, not these exact ones. It was in Cambridge, 1970, if you want to look up the study. But they took kittens, and they separated them into a control group and two other groups, and they put the kittens in a room with only vertical stripes, and another set of the kittens in a room with only horizontal stripes. And they exposed them to light and those stripes between the ages of 4 weeks and 6 months. That's all they saw. And at the end of the 6 months, they were adults, and they could only see patterns in those shapes. So they couldn't jump up on this chair if they were only exposed to the vertical lines. They were blind permanently. I think a lot of the large vendors, the global firms, they can't see what's going on in a city, a town, a rural area. Even in the United States, we have indigenous people that have healthcare issues, and I don't know that we can ever really see what their life is like. But local firms do. We see, we understand the culture, and what we've done is we've started looking at these maturity models for firms like ours. Those of us that have been doing this a long time, and there are people in this room that have been at this 15, 20 years. They have small businesses, they're doing great work, they have great cultures, nobody wants to leave because they have a purpose. And there's some characteristics of these companies that is really interesting. And it's not the same characteristics of a mature professional services firm that has 20,000 employees. They're different. And these 5 dimensions are network ecosystem, regenerative economics, technical architecture. I'll run through them. The first dimension is network and ecosystem. And we can see this is a draft. And for anyone here that's interested in it, I'll put it up. It's going to be on a wiki, and you can help me fix it, because this is just a pass. But there are firms that are strong in these things, and the maturity, maybe it's a 0 up or a 1 up to a 5. But are they, the most important one here is exit ready. Does your vendor let you or help you exit their service in 90 days or less? And if they're doing that for you, training, offboarding, then they're actually very good. They're mature in it. There's also all these other characteristics here. There's also, regenerative economics, or circular, different words for it. But it's like one of the slides I saw this morning talked about $1 invested meant $4 total economic value. It's like if you're paying rent to somebody in another country, you're not seeing that money circulate locally. If you're paying services, if you're helping and paying somebody locally, that money stays in the economy, which actually is a big impact. It has a big, and not only that, but if you're paying people locally, they're friends and neighbors with the people that they're interacting with the services. So they actually trust them. And on to trust, I am happy to be here. Switzerland has highest trust rating in Europe, the government from the population, which is just amazing. And it's like, it ought to be higher than 60%, but that's like twice the US. The third axis or the dimension is technical architecture. Everybody here probably knows all this. Is the system forkable? We wouldn't have Nextcloud if it wasn't, right? These are important things. Replaceable. Replaceability here is a feature. It's important. You want to build systems in such a way that you can replace them. You want to have open tests that are published so people can, change a particular component, doesn't break the whole system. The fourth is governance and stewardship. You know, are your team members participating in standards bodies? Are you working together? You know, I was at an open air conference a month or so ago, and those communities that work, the vendors work with the local communities, and they're developing, you know, electronic health record standards. But participating in those kinds of bodies is very important. And the fifth is culture. This is my favorite. And there's when I talk to people, I've spoken with people in Estonia and Germany, and US all over the place. They're people like us, they build these firms, and you can just tell. Like I forget one of the firms here I talked to, they have their playbook, their open, their manual, their employee manuals are open. They're open up everything. They're transparent and open by default. They just live that way. And those firms that do that are really successful with their customers. There's a couple of things here, and I started a few minutes late, but when do I need to end? Okay. There's a few big things that are happening in the world right now. Procurement is shifting. You know, public money, public code is actually showing up in procurement regulations and rules and practices. The United States, we're seeing a lot of it. We're publishing all this stuff. I'll put it up on the wiki. But there's a lot of movement here where firms that are doing these things are getting value. They're getting contracts. And there's also something happening with capital. There's a Project Liberty released a study earlier this year. There are 3,000 billionaires in the world right now. And 25 years ago, there were 300. And a lot of those folks they want to give their money away, the Giving Pledge, and you probably read the news recently that people are pulling out of that. But what is not in the headlines is they still give a shit about a planet for their grandkids. And so they're just not interested in giving the money to the places they've given it, but they are pushing on their limited partners and the funders to create funds that are catalytic and evergreen. So we're seeing kind of a move towards capital that's available to organizations that are actually making the world better. And we can actually access both the capital, that those of us that are doing this work can access the capital, and we can access the contracts that are going to come our way if we start to basically show proof. Like, how much are we doing to the commons? Are we upstream? You know, how much are we handing over documents? Do we have upstream contributor documents? Are we showing the number of maintainers that we're supporting? You know, there's a lot that we could do. Collaborate. One of the things that I'm like most excited about is like for those of us that are doing this, like we're kind of all in little pockets. We don't really know each other all that well. We might be really good at collaborating with code and GitHub, but collaborating with our playbooks, not so good. Sharing our accounting manuals, sharing how we win. Like, those are things that we could actually start to share with one another without hurting our own business. But as a group, if we started to say, we're stewards, not vendors, and we are a sector, then we can increase our own power as a group, as a network, as a mesh. And so that's what I'm mostly interested in accomplishing. I want to find organizations like ours where we can get together and actually, well, my vision is this. Richard Stallman wanted to fix a printer. And he also wanted to have friends to work with to do that. And I would like, you know, in my home state of Oklahoma, we have an indigenous population, and there are indigenous populations around the world. And if we could create a world where a local healthcare worker could fix a bug to save a life, then that's what I want to see. Thank you.